Hello everybody and welcome back to Slow Your Roll. I'm Alex.
I'm Cody.
And we're going to be talking about mastering the basics of TTRPGs today. What is it really when you boil down your favorite game to its most basic components? Is it playing with math rocks? Is it a quick little improv with your friends? Well, that's what we're going to get into today.
That's right. When we're talking about the basics of the game, we mean this whole video really is going to be about understanding and using the basics of the game. Not just where do you start, but like where do you start and continue the foundation of what runs the whole game forever. So the first thing, and really what I've been telling a lot of new players, is that the game runs on this one concept that players have their characters that try to do something. They roll a d20 or whatever dice for your system and add modifiers to hit a target number. That's the whole game for a lot of games, and that's a very important core mechanic to remember because you can simplify many things down to that one roll, which we'll get into later. One of the other big things is to know your game system well enough that you can fully understand and have a grasp of the scale of the numbers of the game. Like what kind of DC should make an easy, medium, and hard encounter with certain scenarios or variables that you've plugged into that system. One more really important thing is that the whole point of whatever game you're playing, almost literally all the time for any TTRPG, is that it is about collaborative storytelling that ends up fun. If you're not telling the story together, it's only one person's show, including you or a specific player, it's probably an issue. The other basic thing you want to know about your game system in general is that most likely, in every scenario, your players are almost always more capable than you expect they'll be. So just remember that. When you think there's no way this could happen, they're going to find a way.
But if you're really having some trouble giving them a challenge, do the best thing that you can find. Grab a third grade puzzle book and slap it on the table.
That is very true. Puzzles are not that easy. That's the one thing that they are less capable at than you think. Which will bring us to the last basic of any RPG that you're running. Just understanding the basic flow of play. Know when and how an encounter is going to start, whether it be social, combat, or some other variant of either of those or whatever. Just know how the flow of play goes for whatever game you're playing.
And truthfully, the real reason why it's important to start mastering some of the basics of really any TTRPG is so that way you have a good foundation to be able to improvise somewhat different situations that may or may not come up within the rules. In fact, that's kind of the point that we're trying to make is you don't really need the rules, you just figure it out right then and there. And if you really think you need to change that decision, you can retcon it later with a discussion around the table. But hey, as long as you're trying your best to keep things consistent and fair and keep the game moving smoothly, that's really all we're trying to do here. You really have to keep the golden rule in mind. The feel factor. And once you get the feel for the rules, it's kind of like easing into a comfortability at the table too. It's almost like learning to drive. At first, you're going to be focused on your mirrors, your gear shift, literally everything. But as soon as you've done it for a little while, it's kind of like breathing. Especially if you gotta drive every day to work about 30-40 minutes like I do. So what exactly would distilling your game into its basics actually look like in practice? Let's just say there's rules for swimming, rules for suffocation, rules for being underwater, and rules for running on water. Maybe we'll just make this a skill challenge and we'll get across the river in about 2 minutes. And if it's not something as simple as just boiling down what you're trying to do, like getting across the river and foregoing several rules, just try to think of, well, the rule of cool, or some people like to call it rule 0. There's this thing that most people acknowledge that the GM is the referee. They kind of have to use common sense most of the time in a situation that isn't necessarily charted out by the rules, and we're just using that a little bit more than you might think. So instead of looking at the rules, just say, you know, this is what makes sense and your character should be good at this, so do it with advantage, or let's have a bonus. You know, simple little things like that that just make sense, keep the game flowing, and nobody has to second guess or think it or spend 10 minutes looking for the right rule in the right book, in the right edition.
Yeah, for the right system. You know what? Let's just play Go Fish. All right, so we told you which basics you need to have a feel of before you can improvise comfortably on anything that happens out of your power or control. So let's get directly into some of the tips we might have for when that will absolutely inevitably come up almost every session from any player at the table anytime. Things are going to happen where you just have to improvise, and so here's some of the tips we have for that. First off, a lot of times players will get so caught up in thinking about what they're trying to do and everything else that they might ask a weirdly specific question. And in most cases, the way to alleviate this is just ask them what they intend to do. Like, what do you want to do? For an example, a player may actually directly ask randomly, is there chandeliers in this room? It's like, what? Obviously, they're thinking of doing something here. And instead of having to worry about what your answer might be and how it's going to affect the game and it's out of your control and scary, just ask them directly, what are you thinking about doing? Then you guys can be on the same page. It kind of just cuts the crap, you know? It's just like, hey, what do you want to do? Let's make this thing happen. Or like, that's going to be way too hard if, whatever, but just be on the same page about that thing.
And this can come up in almost any situation. The weirdest, question that I've been asked as a GM is this guy's name Bill? And that's because they were role-playing Kill Bill. So, that's relevant.
That's very true. I remember that game. But when you are stuck on a very specific judgment call that the rules aren't helping you with, or you don't want to look it up or whatever, find a way to have a player roll a check of some kind. Whatever they're trying to do, even if it's something, like I said, that shouldn't have rules to it naturally, just have the players roll a check to get things moving when you don't know what else to do. And in that situation, for the record, along with any other situation where you're improvising, do your absolute best to side with the players as much as possible.
Yeah, especially if you're making it up right off the fly. It's like, well, all right, you can do this thing, but you have triple disadvantage.
Yeah, exactly. I have one real life, very specific example that I still remember to this day. It was just one of those points that I was just like, that was bad. I could be a better GM if I don't do that again. And that was, I was playing a game and our friend Cody was underground. They were at the end of this one shot and they were fighting the BBEG right there. And the player underground built a bunch of spells that were like lightning based spells in their character. And so right then he's like, okay, I want to use this spell and bring lightning down from above and destroy them. And I was like, you're underground. I don't know what the rules are supposed to be for that because it's supposed to be lightning, and at the time I improvised terribly and did not. I should have. I was basically just like, you can't do that. And it was terrible. It haunts me to this day, but I should have said, you know what? That might be actually kind of tough. The rules say that you're not supposed to be able to cast the spell unless you're above ground. I could have either just let him do it. I mean, his whole character build was kind of based around lightning spells. The BBEG for a one shot, like just let him do it. Or I could have at least made him make another spell check of some kind with the DC probably being pretty low so that he could still do this thing if he hits that spell check.
And if you're really on the side of like, well, this really shouldn't happen, try the negotiating tactic of no, but. So like, even if you really didn't want to have lightning shoot through the ground to actually hit the BBEG from his spells, totally could have had it hit the top of the surface of the earth and then like earthquake, stuff can happen. It doesn't have to be a, nope, this sucks.
Yes, exactly, which is what I did, and it was terrible. Another example right there on the spot, just look at the mechanics of the spell. What's the intention? Let him still do it, but say it can't come from the ground or from the sky and that's supposed to be a balancing thing for the spell, then maybe just have it do a little bit less damage or something like that. Like if you care that much, but in most cases, it's going to make the player feel terrible because that's their whole character build. Just let them do it.
Within reason, of course.
Right, exactly. Passion rant over.
And he's going to passion rant about that, but literally he realized he made a mistake like 10 to 15 minutes later, and then he told everybody that 10 to 15 minutes later at the table, so I think he's all right.
I'm cutting that out. No, I'm just kidding.
But really the point of it all is trying to boil it down to the basics. The rules are, well, I guess the best way you could put it, guidelines.
The code is more what you'd call guidelines than actual rules.
Barbosa. I remember. Got it.
And as long as you build off of the basic skills of rolling dice, looking at your specific attributes to apply to those dice rolls, you're pretty much going to be totally set when you play any TTRPG. Plus, if you can learn how to collaboratively tell a story with the people around you and make it fun too, you're invited to my table. And there's a good couple of golden rules when it comes to TTRPGs. I think a lot of people tend to forget that we're just making this up.
That's hilarious.
That'll be a bleep.
Yeah, I'm going to literally bleep that. You can keep it in there, though. That's funny.
If you have something that may not necessarily be in the rules, kind of like crossing the river with a skill challenge, you could totally have that for like a dance-off, a cooking competition. It could literally just be a skill challenge to see who could dig the best hole. But all of these things can be totally up to you. And who knows, maybe your mole character now has a new skill called dig. And in a way, if you're totally left speechless, you have no idea what to do, just leave it up to fate. And literally just roll a d20 and let the dice decide. Because most of the time, if you don't know what to do, they will.
Yeah, that's very good. My favorite point there is skill challenges for sure. A lot of things in the game can really just be simplified down to a skill challenge if you want them to be. Which is basically just, like all the players decide one thing that they're doing to help this situation. They say that thing. It could be literally anything. It doesn't even have to be on their character sheet. This could be like their complete output to creativity endlessly compared to what they normally have in the game. Everyone makes a check for their skill. You set a number of successes they have to beat. If they do it, that thing works well for them. You all collectively describe how it works, and that's it. Skill challenges are great. But anyway, thank you guys so much for checking all this stuff out. I gotta ask, I know a lot of people have their own personal GMing tips and things that they're, experiences that have just helped them a lot. Please leave those in the comments. We would definitely like to hear your input on that concept as well. One more important tip, the subscribe button is down there. You'll get better at GMing if you click that. And yeah, it's just a fact. We've gone over the analytics. So what basic rule in the game do you think is the most important to just master this thing? Keep it in your mind and it'll make you better. Let us know that stuff. But anyway, thank you guys again, and we will see you later.
See you, everybody.